I know, for example, in convenience stores, a lot of these jobs are taken up by immigrants and also in nursing homes. Now, this also means that obviously these are jobs that are essential workers. They're really important.
Did she just say that working at 7-Eleven is an essential job? I mean, that was an example that she gave.
Why go on a podcast and present yourself as an authority for Japan when you don't actually understand the issues you're discussing? I came across an interesting video by Think Before You Sleep where he talks about a British influencer called Evie who lives in Japan. I'm not going to cover the first part since it's all about US immigration, about free rent being racist. So I highly recommend checking out the full video because it's just a fun watch. Instead today, I want to take snippets to react to Evie, a British influencer who moved to Japan 3 years ago and speaks very little Japanese. She's doing this weird thing where she discusses Japanese issues to Western audience as if she's representing Japan. But many of the things she says, as the original video from time to time points out, is very misaligned with how most Japanese people actually feel, and at times straight up misleading. 7-Eleven workers being called essential workers has to be on the borderline hilarious and offensive to actual essential workers. And I don't know if I should laugh or be concerned.
Of course, immigration does benefit us. So many important jobs in Japan and the UK and in America are taken up by immigrants. And for example, in Japan, because the same rhetoric is happening in Japan, I know, for example, in convenience stores, a lot of these jobs are taken up by immigrants and also in nursing homes. Now, this also means that obviously these are jobs that are essential workers. They're really important, but a lot of Japanese people just can't do these jobs because they are very physically demanding. And there's an aging population. So I do truly think that immigration does help in so many different ways.
Did she just say that working at 7-Eleven is an essential job? I mean, that was an example that she gave. I imagine that she's bringing up Japanese convenience stores because she's a foreigner living in Japan. Her video is very Japan focused. And so the reason that convenience stores are the issue is because that is where you will very visibly see foreigners from India, just like America. And to that, I say no, it is not essential to mass import people so that 7-Eleven can have 50 stores in Japan all within a mile of each other that stay open for 24 hours a day. Late hours is why they're hiring Indians. You'll see Japanese people working the normal hours, but they probably don't want to work night shift hours for terrible pay, but the Indians will, so they import Indians, which is bad for the labor market. Stuff like this suppresses wages, which means people have to work more hours, which means they don't have time for families, and thus you get a shit economy with lots of old people. This is not a solution for low birth rates.
Immigration is a big topic in the US and Europe, and it's also a hot topic in Japan. I'm not entirely sure of how immigrants work in other countries, but let me give some background about foreign workers in Japan. A lot of them not only work late hours, but even in the morning, they have low-level Japanese skills and can barely speak the language. Because of that, you can find many foreign workers, predominantly from South Asian and Southeast Asian countries, in restaurants, fast food kitchens, as janitors, sorting and packing in warehouses, manufacturing in factories, and as caregivers to the elderly. And this is the beginning of many misleading things Evie spreads to her Western audience in Japan. And it's the image that Japan treats foreign labor as essential workers, when in reality, they're more treated like low-skilled workers. These people get paid minimum wage and barely get any promotions due to their limited language skills. And from a business perspective, giving out promotions to people in limited visa time is probably not the best way to grow. And while the channel who made the video Think Before You Sleep may sound like he's over-exaggerating, it's not exactly wrong when you look at specific fields. And in the case of Japan, that's low-skilled fields. I might sound like I'm over-exaggerating because Tokyo raised its minimum wage last year. But do you think it's because they want more foreign workers to get paid more generously? Or do you think it's a ridiculous reaction to cost increases in Tokyo, with food, housing, even transportation rising significantly?
When I was going to the airport to leave Japan, I had some issue with my train ticket, but don't worry, because the station had a highly qualified Indian on staff to help you with your problems, and he even speaks English. Guess what? He didn't speak English. So I switched to Japanese to explain what I wanted, and guess what? He didn't speak Japanese either. I ended up just ignoring him and figuring out the problem myself.
His story about a highly skilled Indian staff might sound funny at first, but it's a genuine communication issue in Japan. There are many times where there's a foreign worker at a restaurant who takes my order, but I have to slowly repeat myself in Japanese or English because we're having difficulties with the language barrier. And I'm willing to bet this is very relatable to locals here in Tokyo. Japanese people do get frustrated communicating with foreign workers, but I don't think the issue is Japanese people don't like foreigners. I think the real issue is communication, full stop. But let's go back to Evie's argument that foreigners come to Japan for a better life. Let's actually check that against reality. Even Tokyo doesn't pay high wages by international standards. The people actually moving here for these jobs are usually coming from countries where the economic situation is even worse. That's why you don't see a ton of Western immigrants doing this kind of work. As we established, most workers are coming from Southeast Asia and South Asia, and a lot of them end up in lower skilled physical labor jobs, usually not requiring decent Japanese proficiency. One thing people overlook is that many foreign caregivers in Japan are actually qualified medical professionals back in their home countries. And as I'm half Japanese, half Filipino, grew up half of my life in Japan and also in the Philippines, I know many people like this back home. Since many qualifications in the Philippines aren't fully recognized in Japan, many people end up working in caregiving since it pays much more compared to their home countries. A similar thing happens in other countries too. For example, some doctors who move to the US can't immediately practice medicine and have to work in other healthcare roles while completing the licensing process.
I think everyone deserves to move to the country that they want to be in. And I think that that is just generally a human thing. But I also do think it's important to know that you don't necessarily have to be doing an extremely difficult job just to immigrate to a different country.
Yes, you do. Immigration is a privilege, not a right. Unless, of course, you want to contest the ownership of a territory in combat. But maybe the skill requirements of a job is beside the point because these essential workers can't even do the basics of easy jobs as well as Japanese people can, or Americans when it comes to America, because the vast majority of immigrants to any country don't learn the language past beginner level, and it's annoying to have to deal with that, especially in large quantities.
Sticking a bit more to the foreign workers' perspective, while Evie doesn't say it, the way she talks about these people kind of implies these workers get the same quality of life as an average Japanese citizen. That's just not the reality. A lot of them are here temporarily. They earn more than what they would back home, and once the visa's up, they go back. For a lot of people, Japan is a temporary economic opportunity, not permanent immigration. It's also not accurate to say that they're treated exactly like Japanese citizens. The uncomfortable truth is that a lot of Japanese people see them in service roles. Konbini staff, cleaners, caregivers, restaurant workers. Jobs a lot of Japanese people don't want to do themselves. Socially, they end up almost like softcore second-class citizens. When Evie talks about foreign workers in Japan, I highly doubt she understands the social stigma foreigners face from Japanese people. If she did, she would never idolize working in Japan and think it's a good thing for Japan and the foreign workers. In the part of the original video that I don't cover, Evie stands up for online racism. It's crazy to see Evie attacking people that have different political views on race and immigration, acting as this knight in shining armor of protecting minorities. But when it comes to the Japanese foreign laborers and how they're treated, and the negative Japanese perspective staring around them, seeing them as just 7-Eleven workers, or people who do the low-paying dirty jobs most Japanese people don't want to do, she says nothing to defend them. If she did understand these things were going on, her priority wouldn't be talking about cosplayers in the US getting a little rowdy on Twitter. But would she not discuss this ever-growing stigma that has existed for decades against foreign workers in Japan?
And also talking about Japan as if it is this perfect, idealistic place, despite only having been tourists in Japan, having never lived there, sometimes never having even been there.
I love the constant elitism from this girl. I'm the only true fan of Freiren, and I'm more Japanese than all of you other people who want to be Japanese. Calm down, lady. I know you're one of the high-tier foreigners because you've been living in Japan for like 3 years, but let's be real. You don't speak Japanese to any significant extent, which is why you spend this whole interview here saying that you're an activist for Japan, yet all of your videos are in English. In fact, in a prior video, a friend and I caught you making subtitles that were so awkward that they were almost certainly written by AI. So she just pretends to speak Japanese fluently to make it look like she's in a position of authority on Japanese culture. Not that this is an unusual thing for social media influencers to do, by the way.
I'm going to order flawlessly. サムライマック一つお願いします。
はい。ダブル肉厚ビーフが卵ベーコンございます。
醤油、サムライマックお願いします。
サムライマックが2種類ございます。
2回。
14 years of living in Japan, and he can't even order a hamburger without stumbling and screwing up on a basic "would you like this or that" question. His friend had to explain it to him. Maybe that's beside the point though, because the purpose of this video was to trick fans into watching a 30-minute commercial for Nissan. But neither of these two are experts on Japan. They are long-term tourists who refuse to integrate with a culture which, dare I say, is incredibly antisocial behavior and really just means they're a burden on that society, especially considering that they are both activists for open borders and they are actively trying to change the politics of the country that they're a burden on.
This is the part that actually bothers me the most. Her whole vibe is kind of, I'm one of the only people qualified to explain Japan because I've been living here for 3 years. 3 years. While Evie's elitism is quite frustrating from a local's perspective, it's very, very common to see this kind of behavior from Western immigrants who live in Japan. There are so many people who live in Japan sometimes for decades, yet they don't speak any Japanese and have very little Japanese friends. This is a genuine question to those people like Evie. If you don't understand the language, the culture, and don't have many Japanese local friends, you can have this kind of dialogue with, how can you pretend to be an expert about Japanese modern problems when you're only seeing bits and pieces from most likely social media content?
One of the most active and famous Japanese feminists was active during the 1920s. So this is not a new thing. Japan has not suddenly received inspiration from the West to have feminism. I think it's really funny when people say that feminism doesn't exist in Japan because you are seeing it. You've definitely seen something that has its roots in feminism. Basically, what I wanted to say is that feminism does exist in Japan. It's always existed. You guys really, if you don't think that, please just do some research, read a book.
Very Japanese of you to brag about how smart you are and how you read so much. I can see you're really absorbing the culture.
I'm talking about stuff, I've researched this, and it's all Japanese literature that I've looked at whenever I talk about these things.
Me when I lie. But I like how her argument for, yeah, Japan has been feminist all along, it totally wasn't influenced by the West, is to give a single example and say, trust me, you've definitely seen something that has its roots in feminism. Of course, she's not going to provide any examples, but just believe her. And if you don't believe her, she implies that you're stupid by telling you to do her research for her. Did they teach you to do that in college? Here's the fun part. Evie posts a Wikipedia article about a woman named Miss Ichikawa. This is about a 2-minute read. I know that's a lot for some people, but during the article, it says that Miss Ichikawa went to the US to talk to a women's suffrage leader. The great part is that Evie actually screen caps this moment from the Wikipedia page as she's talking about how Japanese feminism was definitely not influenced by the West. I mean, this looks a lot like a direct lie from her. She cuts right under the part that talks about Western influence.
She tells people to go read a book, which, ironically, she probably can't even do in Japanese. That's honestly one of the more frustrating parts of this whole thing for me. She's British, she's white, she's presenting to a mostly an American audience, and she's basically positioning herself as a spokesperson for Japan. Now, to be clear, I'm not trying to say she can't have opinions just because she's British. Where you're from doesn't determine if your opinions are valid. But if you're going to talk about complicated Japanese issues, immigration, women's rights, you need to actually do the research, not inaccurate Wikipedia research. Talk to Japanese people, actually understand how they feel. How do you understand how Japanese feminists feel when you never talk to them? In my experience, and most Japanese women feel quite alright in Japan. I was fortunate enough to go to a pretty solid university in Tokyo, where the majority of students were women. My first corporate job in Japan consisted of a majority of women as well. I feel as though 99% of my life, I feel equal to men in terms of opportunities in this country. But as a way to support your research, Evie, let me tell you something that you should actually stand up for if you're a feminist in Japan. So many Japanese women will relate with me when I say how I felt a cultural disadvantage because I'm a woman when my Japanese father told me that most of the inheritance will go to my brother because he's a man and he will traditionally keep his name. Hopefully this is a homework for Evie if she's genuinely serious about progressing feminism in Japan and isn't just virtue signaling just to get likes and views. Here's a good example of what I mean when I say she's being quite misleading.
Japan right now makes it really hard to want to have children, but also to have a career because mothers here are not treated the best. And I think that's one of the reasons why the population is not doing so well, really.
Gee, I'm so glad we have help with the Japanese birthing crisis from the anti-natalist, terminally offended lesbian who doesn't understand their culture and can't speak their language. What could possibly go wrong? Note that the other British foreign expat who also doesn't really speak Japanese and who thinks mass immigration is a good solution to the birthing crisis also does not want or have kids. I'm noticing a pattern.
She claims mothers aren't treated equally here. I disagree. And honestly, has she ever actually worked inside a Japanese corporate environment? I don't think so. Let me tell you what I actually witnessed firsthand. When I was working in corporate, I had a couple of senpais who were on maternity leave. And here's something most people outside Japan don't realize. Most of the companies here pay those mom on maternity leave a certain percentage of their salary for a limited time. On top of that, their position is waiting for them when they're ready to come back. They're not losing their jobs or starting from scratch. I also watched my pregnant senpais working flexibly. Some shifted to coming earlier and leaving earlier. Others worked remotely instead of commuting every day. Companies these days are actually accommodating. There are a lot of family-friendly companies out there that treat working moms with real flexibility and respect. So when Evie frames it like Japanese mothers just got pushed aside professionally, from what I actually saw inside corporate Japan, that's not the reality. Is the system perfect for Japanese mothers? Absolutely not. There are still many things we can do to progress in this country. But is the current treatment of working mothers the reason why we have a declining birth rate? No. And what Evie is saying, this is a genuine slap to the face of real Japanese feminists who have come so far to bring equity to women in the workplace. One Google search indicates that declining birth rates is due to high living costs. And because of this, both husband and wife usually need to work to support a family, which gives very little time for raising children. Back in the 1970s, where women working was rare because a household can be supported by just one person's salary, we never had birth rate issues. A true Japanese feminist would fight for better economic conditions for raising children so that either husband or wife can either not work or take significant time off to raise kids. Not be like Evie and spitting in the face of how far Japanese feminism and women in the workplace has come. So hopefully you can understand why I'm so frustrated as a Japanese local to see her go in these podcasts and talk to large foreign audiences who want to learn more about Japan, only for her to say things that don't align with how Japanese people actually feel.
Hey, look, it's a pride parade in Tokyo, Japan, and it's full of white foreigners. Weird.
Where are you from?
Iceland.
Iceland?
Yeah.
Do you live in Japan?
Yes, I live in Japan.
So you're living here in Japan for how long?
Only since January.
Like, what made you bring here in Japan?
My work.
But we work. But like, in Japan, it's like, LGBTQ is not really progressed in Japan.
No,
Maybe it's...
but hopefully we will change that.
Yeah, great. I'm sure that's really going to help with the birthing crisis there. But what these types love saying is, look at all the economic benefits mass immigration provides. For one, economic benefits to who? GDP is not an indicator of the standard of living of the average citizen. They always ignore the vast amount of cultural and social damage that comes as a result of bringing in millions of people into a country who did not grow up with the same value system, and not only do not speak your language, but refuse to learn it in the vast majority of cases. And because the economy is downstream of a country's cultural values, all of this in the long term will actually damage the economy and get rid of any short-term benefits mass immigration may have had. Everything is just money to these people because they don't have the social skills or pro-social behaviors to understand how much it changes your environment when you import millions of people into your country who don't speak your language.
I truly do believe that understanding the language and understanding the culture are symbiotic. You won't be able to utilize all of the terms and the phrases and the nuances of a language and convey that to a native speaker of said language if you don't understand the culture that the language comes from.
Right, and I think it goes the other way too. Language is a part of culture, and if you don't understand the language, then you can't understand a country's culture or even discuss shared values, which is essential for getting along with people. The values are embedded in the language. Like I said, it's not just about money. In my opinion, no amount of money is better than living around good people who I can communicate with and who share my values. And really, as for Evie, I think the lack of empathy for how others feel that comes with thinking that you can just go to someone else's country and instantly start telling them what to do is a sign of low intelligence. And speaking of low intelligence, what I get really tired of is all these online personalities trying to pretend that they're experts in cultures that they know little to nothing about.
Think Before You Sleep and Joy are making a lot of sense about how there are so many people like Evie who don't know Japanese, who don't fully understand the cultural and economic context of Japan, but think what they see from TikTok about how cool Japan is enough to make them an expert. A lot of people outside Japan assume Japan's economy is thriving. Let's talk about the comment I got recently and compare how outsiders perceive Japan versus how Japanese people actually feel about their economy. This person said Tokyo is very affordable. Yeah, they're telling me, the Tokyo citizen, how affordable it is, and I'm just misleading my audience. They say Tokyo housing costs starts at 60K. Let's assume USD, which would be 9 million yen. Yeah, he's wrong by a whole zero because it's actually over 90 million yen to the average Japanese income of 3 to 4 million yen. Yes, as he says, it's technically cheaper than somewhere like California, but let's actually look at the price per size ratio, apartment sizes, all of that. Not to mention if a Californian saves all of their income for 10 years, they can buy a home. In Tokyo, that's 22.5 years. I'm not downplaying how expensive New York or California is, because the cost of living over there is ridiculous. But some people online talk about Japan like it's some kind of perfect economic paradise. And honestly, a lot of them are delusional about it. This is where it gets personal for me. I grew up in Ehime, the countryside of Japan, then lived in the Philippines, lived in Ehime again, and then moved to Tokyo as a young adult. And let me tell you, that transition hits different. Tokyo is nothing like what I expected. I seriously underestimated the cost of living here in Tokyo because back home in Ehime, everything is just so affordable. Yes, Tokyo pays a little bit more, but that little more doesn't make up for how expensive it is to live in Tokyo.
Anyway, Mac goes on to point out that as a foreign guest in the country, all Evie does is complain about Japan.
The fact is, Evie herself has numerous short videos complaining about different aspects of Japanese culture from a feminist perspective. She's actually a great example herself of someone moving into a nation and then being angry it doesn't welcome her, even though she's trying to change it and thinks it should change.
And why would you want to welcome someone into your home who doesn't speak your language, is constantly saying you suck, and is trying to tell you what to do? I think Mac's statements about Evie are pretty accurate here. Evie essentially spent this entire video complaining about Japan and talking about how she's going to change the country, despite not even being fluent in the language. I mean, if she was, all of her activism wouldn't be in English, right?
Most foreigners here just, instead of coming here to challenge themselves, they're coming here to find an easier way of life and just kind of enjoy the fruits of Japan without actually putting in the work to also respect the culture at the same time. I know foreigners who live here. Most of the foreigners who live here are like, wow, Japan has great healthcare, Japan is so safe, but I don't like how Japan is politically. I don't like Japan's views on this and that, and I want to change that.
And let me reemphasize here by saying that I am almost certain that she speaks very little Japanese. This sentence here is so awkward that even my crap knowledge of the language can instantly recognize that it was written by AI. The overuse of the word I is a beginner mistake that AI makes constantly because AI translators have no idea how to handle pronouns in Japanese. This mistake is made so frequently that I don't even think she can read basic kanji, because she definitely would notice it and try to correct it if she did.
A lot of foreigners genuinely want to move to Japan after studying abroad, going to a language school, an exchange program, even just visiting as a tourist. But once they actually make that move, a lot of them stop challenging themselves. They stay inside their foreign bubble, mostly hang out with people from similar backgrounds. To be clear, I'm not mocking anyone for being friends with people who are like them, but I don't think it's healthy to not make an effort to build relationships with Japanese people. I know someone who has lived here for 2 decades, married to a Japanese woman, and has 2 kids who are now adults. His wife still tries to speak English with him. Meanwhile, he refuses to speak Japanese at home and still can't speak Japanese decently. 25 years. Speaking of lacking Japanese ability, as a Japanese, Evie's Japanese subtitles are terrible. I'd be surprised if she can handle a conversation with a Japanese who's 6 years old.
My audience is majority in America, so I post around 3 to 4 a.m. every day. For me, that doesn't really bother me because this is my dream. This is what I want to do. This is like so important to me.
So her audience is primarily American, and she very openly is trying to influence our politics as a foreigner who doesn't live here and therefore doesn't have to deal with the societal consequences of the policies or the straight up disinformation that she promotes.
I just wanted to include this part because it's so funny to me. I also post videos in English, therefore I also upload at times like 4 a.m., but they're scheduled like that. So I don't have to physically be up. YouTube just uploads for me. But does Evie know you can literally schedule uploads? There's no way she doesn't know, right? She's either making this weird gesture in a weird attempt to show how hardworking she is, or she genuinely doesn't know about this very simple feature that has been on YouTube for years. If she didn't know, it only goes to show how bad she is at doing her own research. Because she couldn't even find the schedule button when she uploads her videos.
Does she even have any Japanese friends? Why would you live there if you hate it so much? I think the only positive thing she said about Japan is that she likes anime. I mean, that's like if I uprooted my entire life to move to America despite really hating it because I'm a big fan of Spider-Man or something. This makes no sense.
I have met so many people. They have lived in Japan for like 3-4 years. They don't know how to speak Japanese. Yes, we Japanese try to speak a little bit of English, but we would prefer to communicate in Japanese.
This is a part I genuinely don't get. Why do some foreigners choose to live in Japan and constantly complain about it, especially when they barely speak the language? Why move somewhere just to be negative and miserable the whole time? So many people who immigrated to Japan from overseas and who actually enjoy living here would say the same thing. If you want to live in Japan long term, learn Japanese. It just makes daily life so much easier. You can communicate with your community, you can make friends, and live outside of your own echo chamber. But here's the flip side. Japan's English level is also a problem. The average Japanese person speaks very little English, and that can be a problem on its own. Even though I think foreigners should learn Japanese, Japan also really struggles communicating with foreign workers on its end. Because English level stays so low, Japan struggles to build stronger international business relationships. Compared to China, look at those big companies like Google, Apple, or any major multinational companies. You'll see more Chinese employees, partly because their education system leans closer to English. You might think, what is she talking about? It's because China has so many people. Okay, but look at South Korea. A lot of Koreans speak better English than the average Japanese person does, and you're more likely to find Korean names in Western high-level companies rather than Japanese people. One reason Japan keeps falling behind internationally is that a lot of Japanese professionals just aren't comfortable living abroad, working abroad, or doing international business. Compared to South Korea and China, Japanese English proficiency is worse. Honestly, English education needs to become a much bigger priority. It's one of the reasons Japan keeps losing ground to its neighbors. For my own corporate recruitment experience as a recruiter, candidates who spoke English were more valuable. Not because Japanese didn't matter. It obviously did. But because English opened the door to doing business with clients globally. Japanese should stay the main language if you're working in Japan day to day. But for leadership, international expansion, business, Japan's English level needs to catch up, especially at big corporations and international workplaces. Here's my final verdict. The issue here was never that Evie has opinions on Japan. Anyone can have opinions about Japan and can share them. Chris, who's also another British YouTuber dude, he also doesn't speak Japanese, but it's totally fine. My problem is presenting your opinion like it's a representation of the whole Japanese community. She talks like she fully understands Japanese culture when she doesn't speak the language and doesn't fully understand what she's talking about. So why go on a podcast and present yourself as an authority for Japan when you don't actually understand the issues you're discussing? In my opinion, she's actually an inaccurate representation of Japanese perspectives. And that's the whole reason why I wanted to make this video. There's so much misinformation and misleading things that people present on social media, and there's so many people who eat it up at face value, which I think is so dangerous. So at any time, use some critical thinking. Always think if the person on the screen is virtue signaling emotionally, or if they're actually making good points, backed with some sufficient evidence. And make sure to put everyone, including me, under the same microscope, because everyone can make mistakes at the heat of the moment, or if they're in their world too much. If you want to see more content like this, let me know in the comments. Leave a like and maybe consider subscribing so that you won't lose me in the sea of YouTubers out there. Also, I make all kinds of Japanese content, so if you're interested, stay tuned. Bye-bye!